You feel it before you can name it. Not a scream, not a slap, not even an argument. Just silence, and a strange heaviness that grows with each day. You're sitting across from her. She's scrolling, nods at your words, but her mind is gone. And it's not the absence that gets you. It's the indifference. Something in her shifted. You can't point to a single event, but you know something real changed. She used to ask you about your day. Now she listens like it's a task. You make a joke. She doesn't even flinch. You bring up something meaningful. She shrugs it off like background noise. You're still here. She's still here. But it's like you're both performing a script neither of you believes in anymore. And here's the part you won't say out loud, not even to yourself. You're the one who's trying harder. You feel it. You're adjusting. You're planning. You're reading her mood like it's the weather. And worst of all, you're waiting for what exactly? For her to care again? For her to come back to a connection that maybe she already buried? This is where men betray themselves. Not when she cheats. Not when she yells. Not even when she walks away. No, the real betrayal happens long before that. When you start compromising who you are just to keep her attention. When you start doubting your instincts because you don't want to seem dramatic. When you start accepting the slow, quiet disrespect that chips away at your dignity. No one teaches you how to spot this. The world tells you to be patient, to understand her cycles, to empathize with her wounds. But what if those same instincts, to care, to stay, to give her time, are the very things being used against you? Let's be real. Most men were conditioned to endure. You were trained to hold it together, to be the rock, to protect. Even if what you're protecting is a relationship that's draining you dry. You tell yourself it's a rough patch. You convince yourself she's just going through something. And maybe she is. But ask yourself this. When did being supportive turn into walking on eggshells? When did her mood start dictating your peace? When did your needs shrink down to whatever she allows in the moment? There's a kind of emotional decay that doesn't show up in movies or therapy sessions. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up when your presence stops mattering, when your voice gets edited mid-sentence, when your boundaries are treated like inconveniences, when you start to feel more alone with her than you ever did on your own. And here's the trap. You think that if you just try harder, love better, say the right words, things will go back to how they were. But that version of her, the one who saw you, desired you, respected you, she might be gone. And not because you're flawed, but because she stopped choosing you long ago and never had the courage to admit it. Stoicism isn't about being cold. It's not about walking away at the first sign of difficulty. It's about truth. Radical truth. And here's the truth you might be avoiding. If your wife has started treating your time, your words, your effort like they're optional, she's no longer in the relationship. She's in the comfort, the convenience, the story, but not with you, not really. So here's the question. How much of your life are you willing to trade for someone who's already emotionally checked out? Because staying for the kids, for the history, because she used to love you, that's not nobility. That's avoidance. That's fear wearing a mask of loyalty. You didn't come here to live on standby. You didn't come here to convince someone of your worth. You came to build, to lead, to feel fully alive, not tolerated. So the question isn't whether she's changed. The question is, why are you still there she has? If you felt a lump in your throat just now, that wasn't confusion. That was clarity. Don't run from it. There's something nobody tells you about losing yourself. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small trades. You give up a boundary here. You swallow your voice there. You laugh when it's not funny. You agree when you disagree. And eventually, without even realizing it, you're not in a relationship anymore. You're in a performance, a routine, one where your value depends entirely on how well you play your part. And here's the kicker. You were trained for this. Not by her, by the world. From the time you were a boy, you were praised for being the good guy. You were told to be patient, understanding, to make her happy. You were told that love means sacrifice, that real men don't complain, and that walking away is weakness. And that script, you followed it to the letter. But Stoicism throws that script into the fire. Because the Stoics weren't interested in being liked. They were interested in being true. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up each morning wondering how to win approval. He asked what the right thing was, what was within his control, what aligned with virtue, not validation. And yet here you are, wondering if it's your fault that she's cold, distracted, uninterested. You're studying her like she's a puzzle to be solved. But here's a thought. What if the real issue isn't her change? It's your silence in response to it? See, men don't just lose themselves because someone manipulated them. They lose themselves because they allow it. Slowly, quietly, stoically, yes, but not in the way Marcus meant. Not with strength. With fear. Fear of rocking the boat. Fear of losing her. Fear of being alone. Carl Jung once said, people would do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. That includes staying in a dead marriage just to avoid confronting the truth. She doesn't see you anymore, and maybe you haven't seen yourself in a long time either. Let's go deeper. What happens to a man who abandons his own needs just to preserve the illusion of love? He becomes what Viktor Frankl warned us about, a man without meaning. He starts confusing comfort with peace. He tells himself it's okay, that it's just a phase. But his fire dies quietly. His gaze softens. His posture slumps. And when he looks in the mirror, he doesn't recognize the man looking back. The Stoics spoke often about apatheia, a calmness, a freedom from unhealthy passions. But that's not what most men live. What they live is numbness, apathy, a kind of quiet emotional paralysis where nothing's wrong, but nothing's right either. And that's the hidden problem, emotional erosion. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you to stay quiet when she crosses a line. It tells you not to bring it up because she'll just twist it. It tells you to wait one more week, one more month, one more year. But a life built on waiting isn't a life. It's a sentence. Nietzsche once wrote, he was a why to live can bear almost any how. But here's the twist. If your why is tied to someone who no longer respects you, then no how will ever be enough. You'll bend. You'll shrink. You'll break. So let me ask you plainly, when did you start mistaking survival for strength? When did you decide that being a man meant staying, no matter how much of yourself you had to abandon? And who told you that her moods, her silence, her indifference were things you just had to understand? This is where Stoicism brings the sword, because it doesn't ask, how can I make her happy? It asks, what is mine to control? And the truth is this, you don't control her love. You don't control her effort. You don't control her presence. You only control your standards, your boundaries, your response. And if you continue to trade your dignity for her attention, you're not being noble. You're betraying the one person you're responsible for. You, Seneca said, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Maybe this is your test. Not to fix her, not to wait her out, not to love harder, but to see clearly and act, to stop waiting for her to remember your worth, and start remembering it yourself. Because here's the reality most won't admit. Some women fall out of love long before they say it out loud, but they'll keep you around, for comfort, for security, for the optics. And if you don't wake up, you'll stay stuck in that limbo forever, needed but not wanted, present but not cherished, useful but not seen. Is that the life you want? Because if not, it's time to stop asking why she changed, and start asking why you stayed after she did. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. The damage doesn't show up like a wrecking ball. It arrives like erosion, quiet, subtle, almost invisible, until one day you're standing in front of a version of yourself you don't recognize. You stop speaking up. You stop dreaming big. You stop expecting to be seen. And now, you're just trying to keep the peace. But peace built on suppression isn't peace. It's exhaustion. And here's the dangerous part. The more you normalize her disrespect, the more your nervous system adapts to dysfunction. What once felt like a red flag now feels like a Tuesday. What once would have broken you now just numbs you. This is how men become shadows in their own lives. Not because they're weak, but because they mistake endurance for strength. There's a Stoic concept that gets misunderstood often. Indifference to externals. People hear that and assume it means putting up with anything. But that's not what it means. Marcus Aurelius was indifferent to things outside of his control, not indifferent to his own standards. He didn't tolerate betrayal and call it virtue. He didn't allow corruption into his soul under the name of understanding. He remained centered, not passive. But when you let her coldness go unchecked, when you stay silent about the sarcasm, the rolled eyes, the missed dinners, the deflection, the emotional absence, you begin to internalize the idea that this is all you deserve. And that's when the spiral begins. You start adjusting your tone. You speak softer, not because you're calm, but because you're afraid. Afraid of the next argument, the next shutdown, the next moment where you feel invisible. You start avoiding truth, avoiding confrontation, avoiding yourself. And it's not just in a relationship. It bleeds into everything. You take fewer risks at work. You stop hitting the gym. You don't call your friends as much. Your world shrinks. Because a man who is unsure in his own home will never walk confidently outside of it. That's what no one tells you. The emotional instability you tolerate in your marriage, it rewires you. It teaches your mind that authenticity is unsafe, that leadership is punishable, that peace only exists in silence, and that survival requires shrinking. The Stoics warned us of this in different language. Epictetus said, "You become what you give your attention to." If your attention is constantly on avoiding her moods, predicting her reactions, or pleasing her preferences, you're no longer living your path. You're orbiting hers. And a man who lives in orbit becomes invisible in his own life. Even worse, you start to confuse submission with spirituality. You tell yourself you're being stoic by staying calm. You believe you're being patient by avoiding conflict. You think you're being a good man for loving her through it. But love, real love, doesn't require self-erasure. Stoicism is about order, not obedience. It's about mastering your response, not sacrificing your soul. And if you're always the one bending, always the one giving, always the one explaining, eventually, you're not in a marriage. You're in an emotional hostage situation with nice furniture. And the longer you stay, the more you forget how it used to feel to be respected, admired, desired. You settle, first for a quiet dinner, then for eye contact, then for her to just say thanks. And then one day, you find yourself hoping she asks you how your day was, as if that's a prize. That's the unseen cost. You start to crave crumbs, not because you're broken, but because you've been trained. But here's the darkest part. When you bring this up to her, when you say you feel disrespected, unseen, or disconnected, there's a good chance she'll flip it on you. You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. And that's when the real confusion begins. You start questioning your perception. You reread texts, replay conversations. You ask yourself, am I being dramatic? Am I crazy? You seek validation for feelings you used to trust instinctively. And eventually your intuition goes silent. Not because it's wrong, but because it's tired of being ignored. That's how you become controllable. Not by force, but by self-doubt. And that's exactly what happens to too many men who stay too long in emotionally unbalanced marriages. They lose the most dangerous thing a man can lose, his sense of reality. Stoicism teaches that external events don't disturb us. It's our judgment of them that does. But when your own judgment has been distorted by emotional gaslighting, where do you go? You go back to virtue. That's the anchor. That's the compass. Because of a relationship, any relation, enough. That's the word you never say out loud. But you feel it, not with anger, not with bitterness. Just a quiet realization. This is no longer love. This is performance. And you're done performing. But here's where most men freeze. How do I leave? How do I take back control without becoming cold, cruel, or unrecognizable? You don't need to become heartless. You need to become honest. Because if you've reached the point where you're constantly questioning yourself, walking on emotional eggshells, or shrinking your needs to avoid her moods, the real danger isn't in leaving. It's in staying silent. Stoicism doesn't ask you to tolerate the intolerable. It asks you to see it clearly and then act with integrity. So this is your rebellion. And it begins not with rage, but with remembering who the hell you are. Step 1. Stop chasing emotional crumbs. The moment you find yourself feeling grateful for bare minimum effort, like a text back, a small compliment, or a day without attitude, you've already surrendered your standards. And no man leads from a place of starvation. So stop waiting for her to come around. Stop hoping she suddenly remembers who you were to her. Instead, you remember how you used to walk, how you used to speak, how you used to move through the world without begging anyone to understand you. Because this isn't about her. It's about your frame, your soul, your mission. The Stoics were clear. You own your mind. No one else. She can't take your peace unless you offer it. She can't lower your standards unless you adjust them. She can't break your will unless you hand her the hammer. Step 2. Set the boundaries she never thought you would. And no, that doesn't mean shouting, accusing, or threatening. It means detachment. Quiet power. A simple, unshakable line. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." You've suffered long enough. Now it's time to act. Tell her with calm clarity, "I'm no longer available for a relationship that chips away at who I am." No argument. No drama. No emotional courtroom where you try to convince her you deserve to be loved right. Let your absence say what your words no longer can. You'd be surprised how silence disrupts a dynamic, especially when your silence comes from grounded power, not passive aggression. Step 3. Reclaim your rituals. What's the first thing you sacrifice to keep her happy? Your gym time? Your creative work? Your circle of friends? Take it back. Not to prove something. Not to make her jealous. But because you forgot how much of your identity was rooted in action, in doing, in building, in pushing your own edge. Stoicism isn't passive. It's disciplined action guided by principle. So move again. Wake up earlier. Go somewhere you haven't gone in months. Train. Write. Plan. Build something, even if it's small. Each act is a brick. Each brick is a foundation. And that foundation is your return to yourself. Step 4. Stop explaining your worth. You don't owe anyone a speech about your value. You show it, not through flexing, not through chasing, but by being willing to walk away from anything that requires you to become less. That's Stoic power, the quiet kind. Marcus Aurelius didn't need applause to know who he was. He walked with logos, divine reason, personal order. He didn't need anyone to like his path. It was enough that it was his. And you? You've been outsourcing your self-respect to someone who barely notices when you walk into the room. Enough. Step 5. Understand that letting go is not failure. You weren't wrong for loving her. You weren't weak for trying. But if she's no longer showing up, no longer choosing you, and no longer respecting what makes you, then holding on becomes self-betrayal. You were never meant to be a placeholder. You were never meant to keep her emotionally entertained. You were never meant to parent a grown woman's insecurities. You were meant to lead, not with control, not with manipulation, but with inner certainty. And sometimes, leadership looks like leaving. You walk not because you stopped loving, but because you started loving yourself more than the version of you that stayed quiet. This isn't about abandonment. This is about alignment. Because you'll never attract a partner who respects your soul if you keep betraying it just to keep someone else comfortable. So here's what your rebellion looks like. You stop explaining. You stop apologizing for being whole. You stop negotiating your self-respect. And you start living. Not for her. Not for the approval you lost. But for the man you forgot how to be. A man who commands his time. Protects his energy. Guards his peace like it's sacred. Because it is. Here it is. The truth you've been circling. The one you felt in your gut long before you admitted it in words. You were never afraid of losing her. You were afraid of losing the story. The story where she loved you. The story where the marriage meant something unshakable. The story where your effort, your loyalty, your sacrifices would somehow redeem the silence, the distance, the slow bleed of respect. But the truth? Sometimes the story you're clinging to is the very thing killing you. And until you let it die, until you let her version of you die, you'll keep shrinking, quietly, painfully, Spiritually, you'll smile at dinners. You'll post the right photos. You'll say, it's just a rough patch. But inside, you'll know this isn't love anymore. This is erosion in disguise. So here's the ultimate Stoic realization. Peace isn't found in keeping things together. Peace is found in letting go of what keeps you small. You weren't born to beg for attention. You weren't made to over-explain your emotions to someone who weaponizes them. You weren't built to spend your years translating your worth into a language she refuses to understand. You were built for clarity, for purpose, for presence. And any connection, even one called marriage, that pulls you away from that is not sacred. It's a distraction. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus didn't teach emotional detachment so you could become numb. He taught it so you could see clearly what is yours to carry and what is not. Her moods? Not yours. Her wounds? Not yours. Her decision to stop showing up with grace, effort, or affection? That's hers. But your response? Your frame? Your life? That's all you. So let's say it without shame. It's okay to outgrow the woman you once loved. It doesn't make you heartless. It doesn't make you a quitter. It means you finally refuse to die slowly in a relationship that already flatlined. Because when you betray yourself, there's no one left to lead. No one left to protect your peace, your mission, your soul. And that betrayal, it compounds. It shows up everywhere. You'll feel it in the mornings you can't get out of bed. You'll feel it in the way your dreams start fading. You'll feel it in the mirror when your reflection asks, is this really who we became? The hardest part isn't walking away. It's accepting that staying would have meant slowly erasing the best parts of you. So let me speak directly to that man, the one who gave everything, the one who tried, who waited, who stayed patient, the one who loved her in every language she refused to hear. You didn't fail. You just finally stopped lying to yourself. And that is where your power begins again. When you finally understand, you don't need her permission to feel whole. You don't need her apology to move forward. You don't need her affection to validate your masculinity. You need your own loyalty, your own leadership, your own truth. And yes, this truth costs something. You'll lose the comfort of routine. You'll lose the illusion of forever. You'll lose the false safety of a broken bond. But what you gain, your voice, your energy, your direction, that's the trade. And it's worth it, because in the space she used to occupy, a man reclaims his kingdom, one routine at a time, one decision at a time, one boundary at a time, until one day you wake up and the silence no longer hurts. It nourishes, until one day you walk into a room and your presence isn't something you hope she notices. It's something you carry undeniably, until one day you love again, not to fill a void, but to share a life you already love living. That's the final Stoic truth. You're not a support system for someone else's emotional chaos. You are not a rehab center for someone else's wounds. You are not here to be tolerated, pitted, or managed. You are here to lead, with calm, with clarity, with unshakable standards. And if she cannot walk beside you, let her go, because the man who stands alone in truth will always walk taller than the one who stays small to be loved. So close the chapter, not with hate, not with revenge, not with pain, with reverence, because this isn't just about her. It's about you finally remembering what you were always meant to be: whole, unapologetic, free,